2022 has already been a strong year for the horror genre, but despite the initial promise of its clever premise and witty title, them is failing to live up to the high standards set by the year's other horror releases. Them has lots of strong elements on paper, such as seasoned writer-turned-director John Logan at the helm, a unique setting, and an inclusive cast, including a return to the slasher genre by Kevin Bacon. However, them has trouble utilizing these elements to produce a compelling slasher movie. Them follows a group of LGBTQ+ teens, led by protagonist Jordan Theo Germain, during their stay at the conversion camp, Camp Whistler. The camp is run by Kevin Bacon's Owen Whistler, whose initially chill attitude towards them's characters and their identities soon proves to be little more than a mask to cover the true intentions of both himself and the camp. While the teens spend most of the movie grappling with the horrors of conversion therapy, even more horror ensues during them's runtime when a killer comes to threaten the camp. Though this premise is encouraging, them ultimately struggles to balance its horror elements and exploration of issues facing the LGBTQ+ community. Them's inability to deliver upon the promise of its unique premise and address LGBTQ+ issues in a meaningful way has led many viewers, horror fans, and LGBTQ+ rights advocates alike to feel let down by the film. The consensus of them's reviews is that the movie makes for a disappointing viewing experience, making it a letdown among 2022's great horror entries. Here is why audiences are so disappointed by them, as well as a verdict on whether them is the worst horror movie of 2022. Why them is getting bad reviews. Although the premise of them initially appears promising, it has received negative reviews from critics and casual moviegoers alike, as shown by its abysmal 29% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Reviewers acknowledge the importance of LGBTQ+ representation and inclusion in them, but beyond this, the movie fails to deliver in several ways, mainly relating back to the movie's confused tone. Despite marketing itself as a slasher, many have found the movie's horror elements to be disappointing. Them also suffers from other plights, such as awkward dialogue and lackluster character development, but them's tonal confusion and poor pacing are the most significant contributors to its negative reviews. Them fails at being a horror movie. Central to critiques of them is its failure to deliver as a horror movie. There is plenty of potential in setting a slasher movie at a conversion camp for LGBTQ+ youth, given the inherent horrors that are built into the setting, but them apparently had difficulty balancing its goals of rectifying years of mistreatment of LGBTQ+ characters in media with its chosen slasher genre. Slasher movies have a clear set of rules, tropes that are typically followed, which them mostly eschews. While subverting tropes is welcome, it is impossible to forgive a lack of gore in a slasher movie, which is a cardinal sin that them commits. Them initially holds promise through the murder by the masked killer during the movie's opening, but the movie does not feature another kill after this first one until over an hour into its runtime, instead primarily focusing on the injustices suffered by the teens at Camp Whistler. This makes the horror elements of them feel like an afterthought rather than its true goal. Who is them even for? The most egregious issue with them is its inconsistent tone, which creates confusion over who its audience is meant to be. Them attempts to cater to both horror fans and advocates of the LGBTQ+ community, but it fails both groups because of its issues committing to these elements of the story. This leads to both the horror movie elements and the LGBTQ+ topics being handled haphazardly, thus leading to both of them's most likely target audiences being let down in some way. Them majorly disappoints horror fans because of its underwhelming frights and inability to commit to its genre. Despite its promising premise and clever title, them fails to do anything innovative with the slasher genre. This might be excusable if them executes its retreading of familiar territory well, but the poor pacing of the movie makes it feel like them not only fails to do anything new with its genre but anything at all, given its lack of scares. Any horror fan watching them expecting to see a terrifying slasher movie will likely be disappointed by the lack of gore and turn to something else before the killing spree in the movie's third act even commences. Another critique of them is that it fails as a horror movie due to devoting too much time to the bigotry and injustice that the teen characters experience at Camp Whistler, but unfortunately, the movie also fails the LGBTQ+ community too. Them's positive representation of LGBTQ+ characters and eschewing of the "bury your gays" trope is a step in the right direction for cinema. However, since its genre is horror and not socially conscious drama, the movie's covering of LGBTQ+ issues is surface level and has been handled better in other films, such as But I'm a Cheerleader and Boy Erased. Additionally, while them is sympathetic to its characters, it also includes mixed messages, particularly regarding its trans characters, despite its protagonist, Jordan, being trans and non-binary. While them's heart is in the right place with its inclusion of LGBTQ+ issues, it ultimately fails to support the LGBTQ+ community due to its shallow discussion of issues facing the community and inconsistent messaging. Why them is the worst horror movie of 2022? It might seem early to declare a movie the worst horror movie of 2022, given there are still plenty of upcoming 2022 horror releases, but them is certainly a compelling contender for the title. 2022 has already been a strong year for horror, which makes them look uninspired in comparison. When horror fans have options like the Black Phone or Nope at their fingertips when they are looking for something to scratch their horror itch, there is little reason to watch them. While some of its transgressions might not seem so terrible, the fact that over an hour elapses between kills in them is too difficult to overlook. As a result of its tonal confusion, poor pacing, and lackluster slasher elements, them is definitely one of the worst horror movies to release in 2022.